Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tam Posavon, and I am the program head for the multi-sectoral intake of the Masters in Arts and Leadership program here at Royal Roads University. And I have the pleasure of co-hosting today with my colleague, Dr. Catherine Edmansky. And we are absolutely thrilled to have Krystal Cook and Carol Newman joining us to share their perspectives on leadership through their own cultural artistry and identity. I want to let everybody know today that the chat feature is going to work a little differently than it normally does in a Zoom room. It has been sort of designed now to just be a Q&A forum. So anything that you put into the chat will be coming directly to Catherine or I. And at the end of our talk today, we'll be inviting you to ask questions of our panelists, but I encourage you to put those questions in the chat throughout the webinar as we go. And before we begin, I wish to acknowledge that the Royal Roads campus is on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. We humbly acknowledge the rich history and honor the resilience and enduring connection the Coast Salish people maintain with this land. And it is with deep gratitude that we live, work, and learn here, where the past, present, and future of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, faculty, and staff can come together. And with that, I would now like to invite Catherine to introduce our special guest today.
Well, thank you so much, Tam, and warm welcome to all of you. It's lovely to see some folks whose names I recognize and others whose names I don't recognize. And this, to me, demonstrates our growing community at Royal Roads University, and it's really lovely to be here with all of you today. So as my colleague Tam mentioned, this webinar is brought to you by the School of Leadership Studies at Royal Roads University, where I'm one of the professors. And for those of you who are interested in the programs that we offer, we will talk about that more toward the end of the webinar. We'd really love to focus the majority of today's webinar on the insights that will be shared by Krystal and Carey. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our wonderful guest speakers. Ariana, next slide, please. Thank you so much. So Krystal Cook. Krystal is a Kwakwa, Vancouver Island-based theatrical performer, poet, facilitator, cultural consultant, educator, and mother. She graduated from the Anaukin International School of Writing at the University of Victoria and CIT's Native Theatre School program. Krystal was a performer, a creative team member, cultural consultant, and a director with the Intercultural Association of Victoria's production called Imprint in 2024, 2022, and 2019. She was recently a committee member and performer for a 3-year collaborative and creative research project titled Staging Equality, and this was a theater project run through the University of Victoria. She has performed her own one-woman show called Emergence at Impact 11, Uno Fest, The Performer, in a Multicultural Society Symposium with Pearson College and the North American Indigenous Games. Krystal was part of the creative team for a production titled From the Heart, how 100 Canadians created an unconventional theater performance about reconciliation. Also part of the School District 61's Sacred Circle Theater Project. And of course, how Krystal and I came to know one another through Royal Roads University's Walk With Me Theater Project. Krystal was deeply honored to receive the Mid-Career Artist Award at the 2019 Greater Victoria Regional Arts Awards. Krystal lives with huge heartfelt gratitude in the Lekwungen territory with her family. Thank you so much for being here today, Krystal. Warm welcome to you. And let me also introduce our second special guest, Carey Newman. Carey is also a Kwakwa and Coast Salish multidisciplinary artist, master carver, filmmaker, author, public speaker, and of course, a proud father. In his artistic practice, he strives to highlight Indigenous social and environmental issues as he examines the impacts of colonialism and capitalism, harnessing the power of material truth to unearth memory and trigger the necessary emotion to drive positive change. Carey is also interested in engaging with community and incorporating innovative methods derived from traditional teachings and Indigenous worldviews into his process. He creates for and consults with communities, schools, corporations, government agencies, collectors, and museums around the world. And perhaps his most influential work, The Witness Blanket, is made of items collected from residential schools, government buildings, and churches across Canada. It deals with the subject of truth and reconciliation and is now part of the collection at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Carey was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal in 2017, was named to the Order of BC in 2016, and is currently serving as the inaugural Impact Chair in Indigenous Art Practices at the University of Victoria. And in June of 2023, I was delighted to be with Carey as he was awarded an honorary Doctorate of Laws here at Royal Roads University. And his artwork can be found across campus, including in the Dogwood Auditorium. Earlier this week, Carey was awarded the King Charles III Coronation Medal and was honored to receive this award as presented by Mary Simon. So warm welcome to you, Carey, and to both of you, Krystal and Carey. I'm so delighted to be here with both of you today. I'd like to share with the audience that this truly is a special occasion for me. I was saying to Krystal and Carey before we opened the Zoom room to all of you that it's like a dream come true. You know, I've had the honor of working together with Krystal and Carey for many years now, with Krystal through the Walk With Me project, which was essentially a project to help move forward conversations around decolonization at Royal Roads University, specifically with staff and faculty. It wasn't a student-facing project. It was actually for the Royal Roads community to try to better understand the impacts of Indian residential schools and to work toward decolonizing ourselves and learning how to be better allies as best we could. And through that, I think, Krystal, that was back in maybe our meeting started in 2017, but really 2018, 2019 that we got going with that project. And likewise, Carey served as a keynote speaker at our 2017 leadership conference. And he and I began talking about leadership and any insights about leadership based on his artistic practice. And we've come to know each other a little bit more through various co-publications and other ongoing dialogue and presentations over the years. And so finally having the opportunity to bring Krystal and Carey together in the same room to talk about your artistry, your artistic practice, any cultural insights that come to bear as you discuss leadership, it really is a delight for me to be here and help support and host this conversation today. So my gratitude once again to both of you. And I'd like to start us off just by asking the two of you to say a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about your own artistic practice. We were brainstorming together some poignant questions that maybe are a little bit deeper than simply considering, you know, tell me a little about yourself. How about I ask instead? As an artist these days, what's making you curious and passionate? What makes you sit in the stillness? I think I might have cut out a little there. Forgive me if my internet cut out a moment there. And what are you letting go of? So Krystal, may I invite you to start us off?
Thank you for the warm welcome, Catherine. Yeah, really excited to be here today. And thank you for visioning this conversation with Carey and I. I'm looking forward to the rich conversation and just having some time and space to consider how ʼwakw culture informs and inspires and influences my own artistic practice. Yeah, so Nugwa am Krystal Kyayu Klin Lach Numgis, Glu Kwagyoth, Glu Mama Lela Kla, Glu Comox. I'm a ʼwakw woman from the northern part of Vancouver Island. And yeah, live here with huge heartfelt gratitude in the heart of Lekwungen territory and work in the heart of Lekwungen territory in that community for about the last 20 years in education. My work here as a theater artist is really deeply inspired from being ʼwakw in the way that our culture is very theatrical by nature, with the masks, with our orators, our dancers, our singers, our storytellers, the regalia, and even our big houses, the way that they're constructed, So I think growing up with many artists and orators, storytellers, speakers, language revitalization warriors, that definitely, sparked something in me, especially the oration piece, I think, really, yeah, since I was a little girl, it was something I was very interested in, like watching orators from not just my own culture, but other people and the way that they talked, and their tone and their rhythm and the imagery and the movement and the sound that they used when they spoke, So yeah, for me, I think it's a natural fit in many ways, theater, being ʼwakw, it feels, theater has its sacred protocols, and so does our culture, so yeah. So I think when I'm thinking of it, I'm looking back with gratitude, for all of the artists and the land has inspired me greatly. It's something that is prevalent in my work as well, as well as many of our ancestors. I've been reflecting on many of the people that I grew up with in my community, some of the elders that my mom would take me to have tea with when I was a little girl, and they would speak the language mixed in with a bit of English and be joking around. And but I even, I think of that, the ancestors are part of this work today. You begin to understand how sometimes when the elders say they are sad because they've lost so many people over decades, I'm beginning to get a glimpse of it now, of looking back to see so many of our ancestors and our people have transitioned to spirit. Yeah, I think I'm just going to leave it there for now, Carey.
Thanks, Krystal.
Yeah.
Thanks for the introduction, Catherine, and Gila Castle, to everybody who's logged in to share in this conversation. I'll start with my traditional introduction. Yo Nugwa am Carey Newman, Haimon Bachon Tla'i, Hayals Kingume. Like Krystal, I come from the ʼwakw territories up north, specifically for me, the ʼwakw, Giksam, or Wallaby clans. That's on my grandfather's side. On my grandmother's side, we're from Shiam of the Stolo Sol Tumach, traditional territories of Coast Salish people along the Upper Fraser Valley. And on my mom's side, English, Irish, Scottish settler from Saskatchewan. And I always like to include all of that when I'm about to speak my mind publicly, because it sort of mirrors what I've grown up watching our elders and hereditary leaders do when they call people into space, and in doing so hold ourselves accountable to those people. So when I speak, I know that that my relatives are listening. And if I lose my way, then they're there to help guide me, to call me back in. Um, and just reflecting on Krystal, what you were sharing about how that sort of the bubble of the culture, or the embrace, let me call it the embrace of the culture. Um, it's just this sort of gentle thing that I don't ever remember being sat down and kind of told this is how to be ʼwakw. This is what you do, this is what you say, this is how you act. It was more um, it was more modeled in behavior. It was more reflected back in questions, because even when you sit down and drink tea with an elder and you say, "Oh, I'm so curious about this, and could you tell me about that?" Very often the response isn't an answer as much as it's a question that helps you go through the process of thinking about what those things mean, and guiding you back to the the way that our ancestors do things, why they do things. And in doing so, it really feels like a way of helping me, of helping people to take ownership of that. And Catherine, in your description of our beginning of our work together, it was a real catalyst for me to start that process of examining what my artistic practice means in relationship to my culture, and in the context of this word leadership that you kind of introduced to me and said, "Oh, would you do a keynote at a leadership conference?" And I was like, honestly, quite afraid. Um, and I thought that maybe you just like picked the wrong name out of a book, because I didn't feel like a leader. And so I just want to share that, to say that, sometimes it takes somebody else pointing at what you're doing for you to recontextualize it and understand it, through another person's eyes, or through other people's eyes. And I hold on to that because it was the first time I gave critical thought to, like, what have I learned from my Uncle Edwin? What have I learned from my father? What have I learned from the matriarchs who would call me in during our Kwakwa or our Kwagul's Urban Society dinners, and all of those things when we were little kids. And yeah, it's a really it's really nice to have a little bit of time to look back and to understand how you became the person and the artist that you are.
Mm.
I'm delighted to hear that from both of you. And certainly, in the School of Leadership Studies, we talk a lot about leadership and what it means. And of course, there's no one agreed upon definition. There are thousands of possibilities, but certainly the kinds of leadership we're endeavoring to support now is reflected so deeply in the two of you, which is why it's such a momentous and special occasion to have the two of you here today. And like you say, Carey, even in the popular imagination, there's this sense of a longstanding notion of the quote unquote great man theory of leadership, or these more, you hear it said often, strong leadership or powerful leadership, and no real definition of what that means, really. It's more of an assumption about what that leadership is, maybe a position or a charismatic person at the front of the room or at the front of a movement. And certainly those things can be leadership, but there are many, many different possibilities. So I'd love to hear, and I'm sure our friends on the call would also love to hear a little more about your artistry. Would you be willing to share, both of you, some of the projects you've been involved with, and maybe, what you were visioning as part of those projects? What was the consciousness you were bringing forward as you birthed those creative projects, or maybe something that you're working on now? Would you be willing to share a little in that realm with us?
Sure, Catherine. I feel there's a few strong themes running through when I think of a number like all of these, projects that you've listed. And I think, one of the biggest things is for me in my practice, it's about building relationship. It's one of the veins that I work in, and I've said it to many different bodies that I've worked with, there's no shortcutting that, to building that relationship and nourishing it maybe over many days, months, years, weeks, to build a friendship, to work together, to build safety, to have difficult conversations, and also to be brave, to meet more people in different communities, and, I'm thinking of, a lot of the project, like just the space we're in right now, I end up, as well as being a performer, writing my own work in the theatrical context or being part of creative teams. That seems to be a big thing right now, being part of a creative team, which involves collaboration. And, that's big up right now. And true collaboration is no joke. It's hard work. It's blood, sweat, tears, snot, mucus, puke. It's the whole thing. And it's not easy. It takes courage. It takes courage. And, it requires sitting in the silence sometimes. It requires being humble enough to admit altogether we don't know, So for me, collaboration, is huge. And working cross-culturally, collaboratively is also a big lift. So I think, for me, some of those, attracting like-minded people, which I feel really grateful for in these projects that I'm working on, grateful to, be doing some of that cutting edge collaboration, to me, it's integral for the work. It's about safety, it's about trust, it's about creating a container that you can work emergently. I was just, speaking with a friend yesterday about, working emergently in theater, but even just being emergent in life. Like, I feel like we as Indigenous people have had to be emergent extraordinaires because so many things get thrown at us, and we're still feeling the residue of colonialism, residential schools, all those factors there. So we're having to be very emergent in the moment and be very flexible, and be creative and stay curious, and be strong, So I think collaboration is a word that can often get thrown around a lot, but it's actually a really loaded word, and to actually be embodying it fully, it takes, humility, and even that gentleness that Carey's talking about, that gentle humility, humble leadership, and sitting in spaces in quiet and being humble together and not knowing, So I think that's just something that's jumping out at me for, when I think across probably almost all of those projects you listed, Catherine, collaboration is hugely sitting at the center of that fire.
I was just thinking about the different projects that I have that intersect with the things that you're sharing, the idea of collaboration. I know that I get involved in these collaborative or community engaged projects, but I also have this something sitting on my shoulder that just doesn't let me quite fully let go of the control of the artwork that I'm making. So in the case of the witness blanket, I gave up control of the material because the collaboration or the engagement was going out and asking people to contribute their stories, their memories, the material objects that relate to their residential school experiences. But then I went off into my studio by myself and sorted through it in my mind and my heart. And so it's not like you were just describing true collaboration where there's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But it isn't absent of the responsibility that you're describing, because you have to build relationship, you have to build trust for people to be willing to engage in a process like that with you and to share those kinds of deeply personal things. So that's like a maybe just a modification to collaboration in a project like that. But I've also been involved in projects where I carve a pole with a group of young people or students at an elementary school, or people in the case of the spirit pole, people from all across the province. And there really is a letting go of control to a degree in that, because you're handing over the tools and you have to deal with the results of what people put into it, and that I think comes closer to that kind of pure collaboration. But in, like you said so eloquently about how it's all the things, right? It's laughter, it's beauty, it's also heartache and stress. And so, people think about collaboration. Like I think about the way we talk about collaboration within an institution, and how if you co-author a paper, then you kind of just like divide up a third to this person, a third to this person, a third to that person, and then each person gets to put like a third percent of the credit on their CV and be evaluated on that when it comes time for like their career evaluation stuff. But it's not really very reflective of what collaboration is. And I think that's maybe why we don't see as much of it in institutions, because it's harder work.
It is.
It's way harder. You have so much more accountability in a properly collaborative process than you do when you're by yourself. Think about that, like the great man leadership theory. How much easier is leadership when you just get to dictate stuff, as opposed to consultation, reflection, conversation, relationship, where you have to consider the needs of everybody, because you don't have ultimate individual power or authority. But also, how much more does it serve everyone? And so that's when I think about the way that I understand leadership emerging through the work that I do. It isn't that I'm at the center of it, it's that I'm a part of a circle, um, and that whether I'm considering, like my responsibility to like in the case of the witness blanket, survivors who've passed on, or considering my responsibility to those of us who are dealing with this process of truth and reconciliation, these words like decolonization and indigenization in today, right now, and also future generations, my responsibility to them. And I see those sort of cultural values emerging through the way I approach it. Even the ideas that I'm starting to form as an artist, because I have this idea, this sort of theory that I am the maker and the material, where I am remade by the process of making. And so I never come out of any of these projects with these new relationships and the new knowledge and the new understandings that are formed through them, the same person. And some are bigger than others, but I always come out the other side a little bit wiser, with a little bit broader understanding. Um, and I think that traces right back to the lessons that the gifts maybe that have been continually provided to me by our people, by our culture.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it also, when I'm thinking of, true collaboration, we've all got a piece of the puzzle, right? So we're richer with many minds and hearts and spirits, in the room, putting our hearts together, around the fire in the circle, brainstorming, it's richer. There's more layers. therefore it's going to be stronger, and that excites me. I mean, part of the work, I feel like, even with the cultural consultation piece, which just happens naturally, not even when I'm specifically doing that role. I'm doing it all the time, right? We're doing it all the time. And a lot of that time for free. So like, I think, part of my commitment to, being in collaboration, is also about building relationships that are going to have longevity so that this good work can continue when I'm not in the room. Like that's important to me. So I want, any, education institution, any theater company, like I want that work, I want some foundation to be built that work is going to continue when I'm not there, so that to me is important, and, it's also like, as Carey was talking, I started to think about, a lot of my work is really process driven. It is about the end product, right? But process is huge, so it's building that creative safety for people to share their stories, to share their creative expression, to feel safe enough to access their whole body as their instrument, as performers, as theater artists, as writers, as musicians, dancers. So process to me is huge, and that to me is a real parallel, through ʼwakw worldview. I just was even reflecting, often growing up, it's very normal that, over dinner we're talking politics, and we all come from different generations. So, it's an intense conversation, but it's a good conversation because I get to work that muscle since I was young of like, this is what I'm thinking and feeling, and this is my where I'm coming in from this angle here, and so as somebody from my generation, as a woman, as a life giver, all of these different, roles in my life. And so I think at the end of the day, it's really being at peace with that. To me, a lot of the creative process is about the process to get to the final product, whatever that may be, so, and I think it's important and it's valuable, it just makes me reflect even on the whole process of the whole buildup to organizing a potlatch ceremony, like everything that happens behind, closed doors, all of the meetings, all of the love that goes into making all of the gifts, all of the planning. It's a lot, and of course, not to say that we don't work, to make something beautiful at the end, of course, but that process is really important, and we want that process to be done with kindness and love so that everybody arrives there intact, with gifts, with learnings, because we're all lifelong learners. That was another thing that excited me about this conversation today, is like, I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm always excited to learn something new, or to be curious with someone else from my nation about the artistic process, and like Carey said, sometimes when you're growing up, surrounded by, traditions, by culture, by the land, by rituals, by ceremony, by politics, it's very second skin. So sometimes it is nice to have a little bit of space and go, oh, wow, like, the ʼwakw orature, really influenced me hugely. Like, it just impacted me so deeply at a kind of a cellular level, and it's something that I treasure and value and uphold hugely today. Like, listening to our beautiful, powerful orators, it's just very spirit lifting, yeah.
I want to pick up on something that you said about growing up having these political conversations from a young age, and being engaged in multi-generational conversations, and then kind of reflecting that against the way that we see the response to big global challenges, right? To the politics of the day, and how for a lot of people who maybe haven't been exposed to that precarity, to the threat of sovereignty, threats against sovereignty, to the threats against like our international, like I'm talking about our First Nations identities. Um, I see like, because like, and obviously I'm talking about the things that are happening down in the US, things that are happening in different countries in the world where we're seeing like a shift backwards. At least that's what I would call it, um, in the way that some of the politics are going around, like who gets to have leadership, who gets to control power, who should or who deserves access to equity, and this sort of really regressive opinions um, about EDI, like how, or woke culture. And and I guess what I'm kind of angling towards here is I see so much strength in so many of my Indigenous friends and colleagues, in the face of these kinds of conversations. And I think that's because we've been, what is that we've been tempered, like, when you temper steel, we've been hardened, in a way. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us, or like that we don't feel it, but it's less unsettling because that's closer to our normal,
Mhm.
right? Um, and so I see that, and I kind of, I just wanted to reflect on that, because I know through reading through social media and legacy media and having conversations with friends who are feeling really uncertain, and afraid with some of the conversations that are going on right now, and then reflecting on the same conversations that I have within my family, or with people like you, Krystal, and how yeah, maybe how spiritually prepared, mentally prepared we are for these kind of existential conversations. Uh, and I don't know, I don't necessarily think of that as like cultural. I think of that as like the the reality of growing up in a world that isn't kind to your culture, to your people, to who you are as an individual. If we're talking about LGBTQ plus people, um, where safety has always been
Mhm.
an issue, right?
Mhm.
And then I think about the art, right? How beautiful the expressions against these things are, and how bracing they
Mhm.
can be for me when I see a really poignant artistic response to something, whether that's a song, whether it's a play, whether it's an image. Um, how that is part of how I process the fear,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
paralysis that can come from these things.
Yeah. It's true, Kara. I mean, as a mother of three children, it's not a place I like to sit very often, in the fear, right? It's because from my vantage point, I need to do everything I can to make this world a safe space for them. You know what I mean? And to know that they are welcome and they can take up space in this world. So I, like you, I think definitely my art has been um, medicine for me. It's been salve to, like, I feel wisps of, I mean, even as an Indigenous woman living in this time with the history of what's happening to our women all across this country, the amount of deaths and unsolved murders, and, and just the amount of deaths in our own communities from a variety of different, you know, reasons, like just even the amount of death that we as Indigenous people are enduring on the daily. compared to the rest of Canada, right? So I think, you know, for me, definitely, you know, the work is medicine for me. And I also try to create it that it is medicine for others itself. You know, they can take what they need from the work, um, you know, and also be a voice for, you know, to speak to some of that overt, whether it's, you know, overt racism, overt ignorance, overt, you know, ignoring of the reality that our people are still facing today, you know. And for me, it's also about like, it's about the way I show up. It's about the way I show up in spaces, you know, like even, you know, whether it's allowing myself to have a bit of space at a staff meeting to go, hey, my heart is tender. We've lost 3 or 4 people in our village this week. Some relatives, some extended family, but no matter what, it's either friends or family in our home territories, and they are hurting. So we are all hurting, you know? So, you know, I feel like, you know, it's like dropping in to take up that space, let it live, let it breathe, you know, and as I always say, take it into the work, you know, take it into the creative work, take it into the artistry, you know? So, yeah, I just, you know, I just have heap loads of gratitude for, you know, my siblings, you know, many cousins, aunties, uncles, you know, grandparents, you know, and then many other creative spirits, you know, from many different cultures around the world that I've met on my artistic journey too, who have been teachers and mentors and champions and inspirations to me, because I have some of those too, you know, and some of those I'm working with now and continue to work with, you know. So I feel like, you know, Catherine knows a lot of the projects that I come out of the spiritual underground to work on is stuff that doesn't have a blueprint. That's my favorite. And so that's the work I often get invited into or approached on, and I love it. It's exciting. It's a great creative challenge, and it's also, to me, those are the things that not only the world needs, but I need, we all need, right? If it can offer a little bit of salve or a medicine, or for somebody to have a moment of empathy, to be in somebody else's experience, or be open to hear somebody else's story fully, wholly, you know, for a moment to somebody to have the courage to acknowledge all of their ancestral bloodlines, whatever it may be, you know. Yeah.
I was thinking about how how I approach art, and how I often or usually try to use it as a response to the difficulties of being Indigenous in this world, in this country, um, and how sometimes the kind of the weight of that, like, did the witness blanket, and then I was working on a project. I've been working on a project called Totem 2.0, where I'm trying to make a totem out of second growth, but they're all the beams fit together, and I've left space between them. So there's 14 beams that make the full scale of a regular sized old growth, because thinking about enacting my responsibility to future generations and knowing that our sacred tree of life, our cedar, is in peril, right? And partly due to climate change, but largely due to like over harvesting, and thinking about like our teachings about relationship to land, about responsibility to land. And so I've been working on this project, and it's a really interesting project, and I can see how the art is leading innovation, because we've designed a mechanism to shape these beams and to hold them together. And it turns out that now you put an even old growth log on there, you can make it so that, like, Dad, I know you're listening, you can come in and carve on the totem at the perfect height for your physical abilities, right? Because we can rotate it all the way around. And so it's more ergonomically safe. And like, I really love the project. It fills me with joy, but it's still a reaction against
Mm.
colonial harm, right? And so then I kind of set my mind to trying to think of what I could do that would live outside of that, that would be like hopeful and resurgent and forward looking. And so that's where out of that project I started this project that I call the Seedling. And it's planting cedar trees, designing a totem in digital 3D, and having the University of Victoria agree to make and raise the pole when the trees are full grown. And so that's about 600 years from now. And you think about like what long-term planning means in leadership and how it's like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, like that's radically long. But we've got built into our teachings this number 7 generations, but at any rate, multiple generations of responsibility. And 10 years is not that far away. So this project is art leading, what I hope it does is art leading the transformation of some of the relationships that allow for the resurgence of some of these cultural ideas around relationship to land, and transferring some of those ways of being in good relationship with land to being in good relationship with technology, right? Because how are we going to keep this digital file alive when we have to update our phones every month and we have to get new phones every couple of years because technology moves so fast, because we waste it. We don't build it to last. And how do you make an agreement that lasts that long, right? Because you can sign a contract, but they have a limitation to them in sort of Western legal society, whereas a commitment that's made to this earth, to each other, feels like there's a way through our cultural means to enact something that has a much longer reach than a piece of paper. And that's through storytelling, right? Because when we think about potlatches and we're reenacting our dances, singing our songs, and the oral oratory of the culture that you described so well, that's our way of recording and perpetuating our cultures. And so it offers all of these really interesting opportunities that for me are extra hopeful, because my idea is that maybe by the time that pole gets made, generations from now, that
Mm.
that it's made in a world that's beyond these resistant conversations, right? That's actually post-colonial. That's that's kind of the dream inside of that project. Um, and it's another example of how like a creative idea and a simple promise can unlock all kinds of potential for collaboration across disciplines, across cultures, across generations, to bring some of the beautiful things that we have here forward, to help construct a world where a pole could be made free from being a reaction to colonialism.
Inspiring, Care. Hi, Victor. Um, that's Carey's dad. And he's with us today, and I'm grateful for everybody that's here with us today, listening and bringing your good energy to the conversation. And holding space. One thing that kind of resonated with me, Carey, out of what you were just saying there, was just about the beauty, and I think for me, theater, poetry, orature has really been an integral part of my practice, which has been the investigation to find the beauty in things, and to celebrate it and to honor it, and to make space for it, because even amidst everything that is our reality in this time as Indigenous people, there is so much beauty. There's just like so much beauty. So I feel like for me, it's been even probably a survival, you know, mechanism for me since I was probably quite young to find the beauty. You know, and theater, poetry has been, you know, an incredible vehicle to do that. And, you know, to me, that brings hope, you know, and it also allows people to have an opportunity to receive that artwork and feel maybe some self-love, some self-acceptance, some comfort in their own skin, you know. And, you know, because, you know, I think even with my one-woman show, when I took my take on the residential school, I ended up creating a character called the Picker, and I worked with a mask maker who did all the masks for the one-woman show, and I had asked him, Miles Lowry, I had said, please be influenced by our incredible ʼwakw mask, but do not replicate. Be inspired. And he did a really beautiful job of walking that tightrope, which is the vein that I like to work and walk right on that tightrope, push the envelope. Yeah, and for me, when I did my own internal research of being the child of a residential school survivor, was what I could see around me and what I grew up in was the uncomfortability in one's skin. So to create the character of the Picker who came out and, you know, was poking at people, you know, with the big long beak, right? And so I feel there's an, you know, and then many other things within the play or opportunities, whether it's the mermaid or, you know, to celebrate the warrior man, you know, opportunities to fall deep within, to rest, you know, back, to rest comfortably standing with all of the ancestral support that I have, you know, and all of the incredible work that all the artists who have come before me have done, and, you know, all of the weavers and, you know, orators and language revitalization, you know, and regalia makers and, you know, cooks, you know, people who their language of love was cooking for the feast, you know, harvesters on the land, you know, carvers. So I think definitely for me, finding the beauty, you know, and shining a light on it, and embracing it, and allowing it to be warmth, to be warmth that people, you know, hopefully can receive as a humble, you know, creative offering, and they can feel the love and they can feel the warmth and they can feel the hope and, you know, and the truth, you know, the truth. Yeah.
Feel like the sunshine just started peeking in my window here a little bit when you were talking about find the beauty.
Aw,
Uh,
perfect.
this morning I started my day by participating, I was telling Krystal a little bit about this earlier, participating in an active repatriation where I'm on the repatriation committee at UVic here, and we've been meeting for a couple of years to build policy around how to deal with our collections and how to deal with the process of repatriation and how to enact responsibilities. And it's a really beautiful group of mostly Indigenous participants, and we've had really interesting and thoughtful conversations about the process of repatriation. But this was the first time that I had stood as we were returning something to its rightful owners.
Mm.
And it really changed the way I think about the work, the thought process of building a policy, because we had to give the blanket, but we had to accelerate the process because the rightful owner is older and and their health isn't great. And so the request came to see if we could expedite it. And the kind of initial reaction was, well, can we? Because we don't have a policy yet. But we've been doing all of this work, and we've been doing all of the research and listening to the family about their history with the blanket that demonstrated how it came into their possession and there's like conversations around provenance and all these things. But standing there and listening to them talk about their connection to it and using the language, this is ʼwakw button blanket, using our language to describe hasa, like the breath of life, the breath of the spirits, and how through this blanket it has filtered through their generations and been part of the resurgence of their family making button blankets, and how that blanket is the model for why they have the borders made the way they make their borders on their blankets, and how they represent the tree of life and the salmon and these different parts of this piece. And it, like a light bulb went off, where all of a sudden I switched out of the intellectual mode of trying to design a process and realized that I was in the middle of a process, and that a policy is not necessary if we follow that breath, if we follow those connections, and so we haven't even had a chance to debrief with the committee yet, but everybody was really feeling that. And it was like because the blanket was in the room with us, and so were the people who were descended from the maker. And like when you say find the beauty, I think about how beautiful that gesture was, how beautiful and generous the family was with us as representatives of an institution that was holding something that rightfully belongs to them in the way they shared from their family history. And I don't think I could have imagined a better way to start a day that was going to include this conversation than being grounded in like the day-to-day actioning of cultural process, and continuing to learn, right? Continuing to just stand there and bear witness and learn from the wisdom of those beautiful people who were filled with elation and joy after the song that they sang, as they left the building with this blanket rolled up. And I'm going to be reflecting on that for a long time, because I think that breath, the sacredness of the breath and the way it filters through our lives and our generations is a really beautiful way for me to think about how my artwork, or how the artwork that I'm involved with, reaches out into the world, that it breathes itself into the world. And I think that's like what you were just describing about finding a beauty. That's and in difficult times, it becomes maybe more difficult to find it, but it sure is bracing when we do.
Yeah, sounds like a powerful morning, Carey, memorable. And I feel like in those kind of moments, we can't predict how we're emotionally, primally going to feel until it happens. So I thank you for sharing that with us. It makes me think of my dad, and he's been gone for 2 years now, and I miss him dearly every day. But I was talking with Carey not too long ago about, probably greatest teacher for like service to community, that no matter when I did figure out what my gifts and talents are, what my strengths are in the world, what areas that I, have expertise, I need to give a good chunk of that to be of service and community and make the world a better place. Like that was really clear, although it wasn't ever like Carey saying like that. I just knew that from, my parents modeling that, many family, siblings modeling that, cousins, community. So I'm like, yeah, it's a powerful teaching. It's a powerful teaching, and, definitely something, I'm grateful for, something I take, into my work every day when I'm working in my work as an educator, the love that I'm bringing to the precious young people that I have the privilege of loving and nourishing and nurturing and supporting and lifting up and celebrating and, seeing, supporting them to be seen. So yeah, I think that was a big one of, leadership is really about not somebody having like all the power. It's about being of service to community. Like, so you're actually taking care of community. Like, if you're in a leadership role, part of it is to take care of your people, your village, your family, your extended family, your friends. Like, so there's a responsibility there, there's an accountability there. And also, to me, it's about good leadership is also looking for other people's strengths and gifts and the knowledge and wisdom and experience that they have to bring to the whole, because we've all got a piece of it, right? And how much more richer it would be for all of us to put our perspective in and our worldview and our experience from the vantage point that we're at, and I definitely resonate with breath, Carey. I mean, anybody, and especially my theater work knows like breath is just huge. We do so much breath work. We've even incorporated it into pieces. So Catherine, you've come, like audiences are like, we're breathing so that they can also take a breath to absorb the work and, stay, in a calm the nervous system, right? Take care of our audience, at the same time support them to be brave to get activated through the piece as well, and be activated maybe when they leave and inspired to take action. So I think for me breath is critical to the work that I do, because it's about being present. How am I going to show up in these spaces as a creative team member, as a director, as a writer, as a performer, as a poet, and then also knowing, like, I come back to this whole thing with the family, because I was kind of chuckling to my husband because I'm like, I've done this my whole life. We go and we debate all the politics that are happening in the community, kind of gets heated here and there, but it's such a great exercise to be open, to broaden my view, to stay in humility, to be lifelong learner, to let things affect me so that I can go away and sit with it. But it's such a great thing. And yet at the end of it, and then we drop it because we're still family and we love each other. Right. And I love that it's been done cross generationally, because my dad's really coming in today because we could have some good, intense conversations about different politics or traditions or things in community. And we don't always see eye to eye, but then we leave, we go away and we consider it. So I think, for me, that was a big teaching, was to be able to hear other people and consider it. We don't have to agree, but I'll consider it. I'll listen, right? And, so yeah. And also creating a space that everybody can speak up, in hopefully a good way that's not harming others and harming self, right? But in a way it can get passionate, it can get intense, but in a safe way that people are recognizing they're getting triggered or maybe getting dysregulated. So, whoa, I need to take a breath. I need to step back, or someone else can come in. But at the end of the day, we do have a circle of love and respect and integrity here that, we have that relationship, and it's solid, it's strong, it's foundational, it's ancestral, and it's important. Like we need each other. Like whatever's state we're in this world, we're not going to be able to do it alone. That much I know. Even in the work I've done cross-culturally, like, thinking about this last project, this was the third rendition we did of it, and we need everybody's stories from all parts of the world to be heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's we're in interesting times. We're in complex, multi-layered. It's wild, and like you say, Carey, you're trying to do work that, has integrity, has depth, is accountable to our community, to our families. We're representing our nations and villages at all times. So, and work that's going to have some longevity, so to me, it's worth the extra energy. It's worth putting the whole self into the work, heart, mind, body, spirit. It's worth taking the ancestors with me. It's worth thinking about the future with me. It's worth taking everything around me into the work.
It's kind of where I've found who I am, right? Like, think back to my early career as an artist and just trying to figure out how to make the things, and like looking at the work of those who came before and making things and then putting them up for sale and hearing from relatives, hey, you shouldn't be making those ones for sale, right? Those are sacred. And being part of that kind of system of communal accountability, but also being like a young guy who wasn't really thinking too deeply about my own actions and the way that they impact upon others. And then slowly going through a process of starting to think about what it means to make these things and what it means to allow them to be shaped in some degree by a gallerist who says, oh, I want a mask, but I want it to have blue paint on it because blue's hot this year. Or somebody who wants something that's going to match the couch in their living room. Or they don't have quite as much money as the project might need to do it the way that we would do it in our original ways. And so then you start nipping and tucking at corners to try and make a living. And then coming to a decision kind of in my late 20s that I was no longer going to allow external influence over how I approached the work that I do, because I realized that as an artist who's a Kwakwa and Coast Salish person, that the work that I put into the world becomes a record of our culture. And if I'm allowing it to be influenced by these externalities, then is it really honoring those teachings? Is it built from those belief systems? And I'm not going to sit here and claim that I know the way now, because I'm still learning, like all of us are. But as soon as I became open to the idea that what I was doing, even just in the act of making a rattle or a mask, represents who we are, it shifted how I felt about my responsibility. And so I made that commitment, I think it's like 20 years ago now, maybe more, that I would no longer allow money to dictate anything about my work, and that I would only make the work that I wanted to make, in the way that I thought it was meant to be made.
Mm.
And I started to pull back on things that I didn't think should be in the commercial market coming out of my studio. And once again, I was being shaped by that process, right? And it's like all of those calls, all of those reminders that come from family, from aunties, from sisters, from friends. They start to kind of shape who you are, and I'm so different in my sense of responsibility now, than I was then.
Mm.
And I really credit that system that you're describing for shaping me, for being the hands that made me into the person and the artist I am now.
Right from when you were playing the piano at the Victoria Quaggas Urban Society dinners, eh, Carey?
That's right. That's right. Or I think, didn't Marion and I perform at your parents', was it, or I don't remember which anniversary it was,
Well,
but
yeah,
it
I
was
think it
that
was the
big one. It
45th
was,
in James Bay. Yeah, oh, okay.
yeah, yeah.
Aw, that's
Oh,
a nice memory. That's a sweet memory. Yeah. Um, Kind of one thing that pops up when you were just talking there, Carrie, is about for me, like I feel like I reside kind of in the spiritual underground, and then I come up for these projects, right? That I've, most of them don't have that blueprint, but it's cutting edge, and that's what I like. And but it is about, for me, um, it is about being selective. Like, it has to, for me, it has to resonate, with my principles and values, and I have to feel like it's going to be of value to community and to the people, to the creatives involved, right? So yeah, I mean, and we're in an interesting time, with kind of reconciliation spinning like bees all around us, right? And people wanting to check boxes and stuff, you know what I mean? So but by being on the spiritual underground, but building relationships with different folks and community and like-minded, and then I come up to do these projects, it feels good. Like, and it's not about, to me, it's not about the number of them. It really is about the quality, because now those projects are having longevity. We've built some relationship, we've built creative, artistic, theatrical capacity, right? And when I was I mean, part of another line of my work is I usually try to gently bring family into the work, right? Extended family, cousins, bring people into the work, right? And that's been, kind of, I'm like, I think that's part of my practice. Like in reflection of, in the last few years, I've like, that's part of my practice. And I kind of love that, so bringing, family into the work, whether it's them being part of the audience or actually getting involved in the work or consulting or, getting permission for their story to be there or actually getting on the stage, right? Or being inspired to pick up their creative gifts again. Maybe they haven't sang for a while or, so I kind of love that, and, but I think in these times ahead, I think it is important to be selective with stuff that resonates, with our hearts and our spirits and our minds and our bodies, and that resonates with that voice that we hear, the ancestral guidance, your gut, whatever you wish to call it, but that thing that is guiding you to do that work. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you can wrestle, maybe you're going to get paid a lot to do this, but then it's like, I think it is important to listen to that inner compass for all of us, because I think this work going forward creatively, artistically, it is important. Like it matters. It can open up discussions. Like lots of our work, we're hoping to provoke discussions. We're hoping that people get a moment to feel other people's lives in their bodies, get out of their head for a bit, and feel it, and also be able to see different ways of viewing the world. Like we're so much in the dominant system all the time. You know, like we're so much in the dominant worldview. So I love the theater for people to go in and to be able to experience other worldviews. And then it's cool. Like, what if you get something collaborate together on stage, you know, the two worldview, like, so then you get something new and interesting, right? But for people, I want to normalize, you know, ʼwakw worldview. I want to normalize, put it into the narrative, keep putting the stream of consciousness, you know, it's a healthy interruption. It's a healthy, keep putting it in, you know, because I want, you know, I want our kids to be able to go into their education place, into their soccer team, you know, into their university in this country, and their reality be reflected somewhere there. That it's not so foreign, that they don't look like they have three heads when they're talking about things that are going on in our communities or our stark reality as Indigenous people in this country, you know? So that's one of the things that I feel like, you know, art theater is a brilliant channel, you know, for that, that creative, it's a creative exchange, it's a energy exchange, you know? Yeah, and it can also affect the way people show up, you know, like how are people showing up, you know, in life, in your creative art practice, as a parent, you know, as a friend, how are we showing up in the staff room? Are we being brave when something's said that's not right or is inappropriate or is off? Are we being brave, you know, or at the corner store or, you know, at the soccer meeting, like, you know, or even in our families, to kind of be brave and say, whoa, well, actually, that's not how I feel, and this was my experience. So, you know, so I think it's important for all of us, no matter where we come from in the world, to be having those conversations with our families, you know, whether it's about ancestral bloodlines, what's the history? How did you get to this country? How did you get to this country? There's a rich narrative there. There's a rich story that's worth exploring. You know what I mean? Because now we're in this shared history. This isn't just on my shoulders. We now have a shared history in this country. So it's a shared responsibility to create and curate, you know, what that's going to look like going forward, you know. So yeah, I mean, advocacy is huge, you know, especially in the education work I've done, but even in the artistic work, like advocating that our voices are safe in these spaces and that all voices are safe in spaces. And, you know, to me, one of the most radical things too is like to be in that facilitation, creative team role and to let true stories, like people's true stories, be told. So I'm not critiquing it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not, you know what I mean? Whether I think it's politically right or wrong, but to be really in a space, of course, within reason and, you know, appropriate, but that people can have their say, because that's hearing uncomfortable truths about what people talked about with their families around the dinner table, being able to just hear that. That's what's going to start the healing. That's what's going to start energy moving. And I'll leave it there.
That's Maya Kala, right? The to respectful relations with each other, with the self, and
Yeah,
with the land,
yeah.
like that. That's something. And when you say it like that, of course, people can have their opinions, but their opinions can't be about like suppressing or putting down others. That's where my line is, right? Like, I'm open to different responses to things and to robust conversation. But if your opinion is that someone else is less than you, then I'm going to have to say something about that. I was just thinking about how you've talked about emerging from the spiritual underground, and then I had this picture of you kind of like climbing out of the fire in the big house. But I wanted to share that, but I also wanted to say that this like idea of working without a blueprint, that's where maybe our artistic practices are most closely intertwined, because I come up with these ideas like the witness blanket or the totem 2.0 or the seedling, and I have no clue how I'm going to get to where I'm going. I just know that there's an idea there. And then the process guides the the guardrails on that are the culture, are all of these things that we've been talking about around how do we sort through and make decisions? How are we accountable to the people who we're working with? Um, and it's an enactment of cultural being through a creative practice that feeds into these relationships, that builds them, that creates that trust and accountability, and ultimately helps to shape the final work. And as I already said, being remade through the process. And I just thought, like, what a nice, like, realization to come to, that as those of you out there who don't know, Krystal and I have known each other for decades, but we, until Catherine brought us together to have a conversation about having this conversation, we'd never really dug into like our creative lives and how they interlink, because we've always been in each other's orbit through through our Kwakwa cultural world and families, but we hadn't sat down and said, "Hey, tell me about what you do," and tell that conversation. And now that we've had the conversation a couple of times, I see just so many similarities in the, like, what's going on in here and what's going on in here when you're going through your process. And when you open the door to say, who knows, maybe collaborations are in the future. I think so. At least I sure hope so.
I think
So
so. Yeah, it would be really cool. And I also think, Carey, what you're just talking about there is like, to me, I'm realizing like even my parents' curation towards what we value as Kwakwa has influenced me hugely. You know, their love of the land, the importance of family, the importance of being great hosts, the importance of being great hosts. Like that is one thing for certain. We as Kwakwa are great hosts, and we are trained to be great hosts to people, all of those things. So I am very aware of the deliberate curation in my growing up from family, extended family, community, nation, to the values, Kwakwa values, and, to be of service, to be humble. Like Carey said, we don't go announcing I'm this, I'm that, I'm all these things. Like it's just, even for me, I always have a hard time reposting things to promote myself, but I really had to just like gather strength and like I was like, I have to do this, but I can laugh at myself because I have a resistance to doing it, to promoting myself. So but I'm sitting here in just so much gratitude. Even when I was sharing about Carey earlier, I was kind of teasing him a little bit about, because we used to have our nation used to have the Kwakwa Urban Society. We used to have dinners, to bring all of our community together, family, extended family. And, even that deliberate curation from my dad and many others in the community, the team that he worked with, to make sure that we were connected, to make sure that we know who we are and where we come from, and you look back now in hindsight and it's a very beautiful teaching, and it's done through action. It's done through doing, and I'm really, yeah, I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful to have been able to sit, especially with the elder women, with my mom, and just be in their gentle, kind, loving energy and their sweetness, and just sit. A lot of my teaching growing up sometimes was just sitting in meetings, just sit and listen, just sit and listen, sit and be, in a political meeting, church meeting, like whatever kind of meeting, sometimes I just had to sit and listen. So like, that's a powerful teaching, right? Because it's also works that muscle of ours to not react or feel like I have to say something every time. I don't have to say something every time. Sometimes that whole meeting is going to be me listening. So, and I think we had talked about this as well, like when Carey and I had kind of done our pre-meeting to this one, which I appreciate, Catherine, there was a process to us coming together and, really allowing us to be sovereign about if we wanted to do this. And I thank you for that, and feel the vibe out. Is this something we want to do? But just allowing, even, and Carey and I had some natural organic silences through that, and we just allowed it to be. And I think, in society, everything's so rushed, so go. Sometimes we don't have time and space to just take everything in and just be able to, let's all take a breath right now, go. Everybody online, take a breath with us, and to be able to just sit in the silence, it's actually really cool and it's really beautiful. And sometimes there's magic there and there can be some great answers, So yeah, I was thinking of what our teachers and inspirations, what they valued. So then therefore they drew our attention to those things. So it was deliberate. So as in hindsight, I'm just like, wow, I'm just really grateful.
That's the last thing that I'll share, because I was thinking it earlier and I didn't fit it into my thoughts about the artistic process. Is one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately when I make work is the power that art has, not to give answers, but to ask questions.
Yes.
And how I've started to think about making art that's a reflection of that experience of sitting with elders, sitting in that beauty and gentleness that you just described. And rather than telling people what to think or how to feel, invite them to ask questions. Because the answers to those questions, when we come up with them on our own, that sinks in, right? Mm-hmm. That's not a solely mental exercise. That's an embodied, spiritual, heart-filled, thoughtful process. And that's where people should change, right? That's where people are willing to be uncomfortable to once they see something like what you've been describing, like what we talk about, and so that's kind of my more recent realization and goal is to intentionally seek ways of making art that invites questions and conversation, and are built in that. I guess it's not an image, but built in thinking about that experience of never just being given the answer, but being invited and directed to things in that gentle way of curation that you've just described was our experience within our community. And it's, boy, if I could figure out how to do that, then I think I might make a career of this.
And I think that would be another, connection for us, Carey, would be, Catherine, especially the work that you've seen. I mean, I think, a big intention of the creative, the amazing creative teams that I've worked with is a lot of it is about leaving questions, leaving space for people to think and feel and consider, right? And be curious and breathe, so I too am it's been a big practice in my work is bringing things up, but also leaving questions on the floor, because I don't proclaim to have the answers. I'm okay in the silence. I'm okay. I'm really okay in the not knowing. And I'm excited to, be working with other like-minded artists and creatives or educators, or sports people or whoever it may be, but, that are interested in us exploring what that might be, massaging it, teasing it out, flossing it, so that kind of excites me, having those conversations. Definitely wanting the work for people to be provoked, to think, to talk to someone else about it, to talk to themselves about it. Like you say, Carey, come to your own conclusions, take your own teachings away, whatever resonates with you, and yeah, I mean, I just think even of, like all of the organizing and administration and cultural consultation and the research and the genealogy even goes into planning a potlatch, but even just into planning some of our community events that has happened over the years, just the amount of teamwork that's required, and artistry and creativity, I mean, and ultimately moving creatively in the world. Like, we're creative beings, so whether it's running it, at the store and something happens and you offer a creative morsel to help the situation, or you're creative over there, at that work, or, yeah, it's, because nature is holding all of this, right? And nature is so forgiving. Nature's unconditional in its love for humanity. So I think a vein of the work for me is also the invitation for people to reignite their relationship with Mother Earth or nature in whatever way. I mean, prior to all the colonization that happened around the world, everybody, no matter where they came from in the world, had teachings. They had a relationship to the land, had their stories, they had their storytellers, no matter where we come from in this world. But at one time, everybody had a relationship to the land where their ancestral bloodline comes from. What would that be like for people to have the invitation to explore that, Interesting. Could be interesting, Rich.
I'm looking at you, Catherine.
I suspected you both were at this point. My goodness. It's difficult to find words to interject at this point after the many gifts you've both given us over this past time together. And I think about where we come from, leadership theories in the 1800s that we started the conversations with, to where we are now. And through this conversation, this generous sharing, this humanity, this creativity, as you said, Carey, mediated by technology, here we are. I think you two have co-authored the new text on leadership today. So many rich offerings, so many rich gifts. I'd like to take just a couple of moments to check in with the audience here, with the folks who are on the line with us. If people would like to write in the chat, that will come directly to us as co-hosts, as moderators of this session. Just as Carey and Krystal have said, what's resonating for you? What questions are you left? Perhaps not questions directly for Krystal and Carey, but the questions that are left for you. What are you taking away from this powerful session here? We'd love to just hear a little bit about how this is touching you, resonating with you and for you. If you want to write in the chat, or perhaps if there are some brave folks out there, we are coming to an end. So I'd like to ask that you don't perhaps take a long time speaking, but if there's anyone who's brave enough to turn their microphone on and speak, or if you would like to write in the chat, we can take just a couple of comments or insights from the audience at this point. I see Marion turning your camera on. Does that mean, Marion, that you would like to say something? I think Ariana, oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, great.
To unmute. which could be helpful in many occasions, many settings. I've been listening as I've been doing a little bit of work here at the university. I'm a new prof in the music department at UVic. And so much of what you're saying also is about how you work and all the connections that you're making to how you feel and how strong you are in certain ways, because you're prepared through all of this, makes me realize that we really do share so much. And you've been highlighting all of that for me. And I just feel like I'm lit up in a really amazing, because we've known each other for so long, and it's like, we're all here doing this kind of similar work of making those connections, of being here, of being alive and modernizing and bringing back the old in ways that fit now, and pulling aside the curtains of colonialism that we've been looking at our own cultures and selves through. And it's just, this has been so affirming and lovely. And I just want to say thank you. You've given me so much to think about. So this is super. More of that, please.
Gaelic Casla, Marion. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Marion.
Marion. Oh yeah, go ahead, Carey. Maybe you could
I would just say hi.
briefly introduce Marion for people who don't know.
Marion Negega is my sister. She's a world famous opera singer. You might hear her on Saturday afternoon at the opera, which is a CBC radio show that she hosts. And our family is so thrilled that after spending half of her life living in other parts of the country, she's come back here. And we're sitting in our offices in buildings just across the ring road from each other. So
Yay.
it's pretty lovely to have Marion back. But yeah, she's one of her and my sister Eleanor, among the sibling council, which is where half of the wise things, that if any of them were wise, that I shared today come from. Because that's where we filter through the difficult things that we're facing. We share it through our text chats and our conversations, and it really becomes part of like the community, but also system of accountability.
Beautiful.
I also want to say hi to Luann if she's still out there, because she said, wave from the inside the thing. Hi, Luann.
Hey.
That's another.
Hey, Lou. I can't
Beautiful to be surrounded by family and friends. Luann, are you out there still? I'm not sure. On my screen, I can't see everyone either. Yeah.
I can't see anybody either, Catherine.
But, since we're acknowledging family, I'll say hello to my father, who's also online. Hi, Dad. Nice to see your name on the list. And it's beautiful to be surrounded by friends and family. And I think completely fitting to everything that you've been talking about today. Perhaps I'll share one more comment that's in the text chat here that's come in directly to me from Alice McGilvery, who's one of our leadership faculty members in the School of Leadership Studies at Royal Roads. And the question that Alice is left with is how to nurture an understanding of the unconditional love of nature in today's Western world. Just picking up on some of the last comments that you made there, Krystal.
Nice, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, my friends, this has been such a delight. I'd like to wrap up this part of the webinar now. Is there anything further the two of you would like to say by way of closing before we sort of move into some of the closing remarks on behalf of the school?
I just want to say, Gaelic Casla, Catherine, to you for convening this conversation, and Krystal, for the conversation itself, but also for the like bumping into each other at a totem ceremony at Oaklands Elementary not too long ago, and experiencing how our cultural practices integrate into the school system here in Victoria, and what a beautiful day that was too. So it's been really great to have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Gaelic Casla, Catherine, for visioning this and spearheading it. And I love when things like this are born from past relationships that are growing and nurturing, because, you know, as we talked about, it's such an integral part of the work is building those relationships. And I just like to thank everybody that came on with us this afternoon as well. You know, could feel your good energy, and also the people that are going to listen to it later, and everybody that helped to do all the technology today as well. And yeah, it's been fun, Carey. I love that 6 degrees of separation in the ʼwakw world, right? But yet so many ties as well, so many beautiful ties. And just, I really just really appreciate the opportunity for myself as an artist to just be able to reflect on my practice and my work, and then also find the connections that we have in our work. It's been really lovely and inspiring. And like I say, I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm gonna take this good medicine away with me today, and let it, you know, let it be good salve, you know, and inspiration for going forward. So yeah, thanks, Catherine, too, for just going with the flow and giving us space to just flow and have some breaths and have some silence. And yeah, it was beautiful. Taylor Kessler.
Thank you both. Well, it was beautiful for me as well. And, you know, Carey, to echo your words, I believe that I was changed through the process myself of this experience. And I wonder if others were as well. And Krystal, to echo words you shared with me on another occasion through one of the performances you were involved with that have so deeply touched me, you know, this sense of shared gratitude, infectious generosity, and sustained joy. Both of you have shared those values, those teachings, those gifts with us today. So I'm certainly walking away with a sense of not only my individual, but an interconnected, shared sense of gratitude, infectious generosity that you've shared, and perhaps joy that can be sustained over a longer period of time. Many thanks to both of you. You know, this concludes the dialogue, the conversational aspect of our program. And perhaps I'll just tap my colleague. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's give a round of applause. So, any hearts, any applause, any you know, kind words that people would like to say at this point to Carey. Just some audience reaction. You know, if you want to turn your mic on. Oh, maybe you can't turn your mic on in the way things are formatted in this webinar. But yes, we're seeing lots of love, lots of hearts coming up on the screen, lots of gratitude coming through. So many thanks to both of you. And Ariana, may I ask you to just put the last couple slides up so that folks know how to get in touch with us. If you have any future questions about Royal Roads University, you know, this kind of conversation wouldn't be possible without the hard work of folks here at Royal Roads who are willing to put in, like Krystal said, there's all kinds of stuff that happens behind the scenes so that we can hold space like this together. And this email address that you're seeing on the screen here, learn.more@Royal Roads University, is a very easy way to get in touch with us if you have questions about this kind of opportunity, this webinar, any of our programming at Royal Roads University. And then more specifically in the School of Leadership Studies, we have a range of different offerings that are kind of reflected on this honeycomb slide here. Of course, many folks have heard of our Masters of Arts in Leadership. You may not have heard of some of the other programs that we have within the School of Leadership. So we have a graduate certificate that feeds directly into that Masters of Arts of Leadership. We run it as both an online, fully distance offering. And then we have our standard blended offering, the style that's been running for many years, where people come together in 2-week residencies on campus. Likewise, we have a similar offering with a health specialization, and we have a similar offering with an executive leadership specialization and a values-based leadership certificate that ladders directly into that executive leadership offering. So those are both blended programs that are mostly online with on-campus residencies as well. And then you may not know, or you may know that we have a whole suite of global leadership programs. We have online on-campus and hybrid or blended offerings of all of our all of our global leadership programs. We have graduate certificates, we have graduate diplomas, and we have a master's degree. So like I said, there are many, many different options. All of the certs and the diplomas stack in or ladder into the master's offerings of global leadership. And you can study, like I said, either in person, fully on campus, or in that blended program coming in for the residencies only, or you can study fully in the online environment. So lots of different options for leadership programming at Royal Roads University. If you have questions, please contact us, learn.more@royalroads.ca. Again, a huge thank you. Ariana is on the line with us. Thank you so much, Ariana, for your work preparing this webinar today. Thank you to everyone who showed up to participate, to listen, to learn, and everyone who will be watching this later, to my co-host, Tam Potsabon, and of course, one final thank you to our special guests, Krystal and Carey. Thanks, everyone. That's a wrap.